hello and welcome to the Tucson Blockchain channel. Today I'm going to be talking about money and mental health and some tips that I've found helpful to finding stability in my life financially. And it's made things a lot easier for me. So this is something, the topic of money is really, really important, especially in a time like this when we have incredible economic instability. We're looking at jobs ceasing to exist. We're seeing record levels of unemployment. We're kind of sitting here just wondering what the future will look like. And so the first thing I want to highlight is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I like this because it's a very basic way to visualize how we work. And so I'll just explain it briefly. So a lot of these things are being threatened, and that's a big reason why we're seeing people have increased issues in mental health. It's not just that the news is overwhelming, it's that our basic needs are being threatened. So physiological needs, this is the bottom of the pyramid. You cannot really focus on any of these if these are not met. So food, water, warmth, rest. So that's being threatened right now as we're seeing a record amount of people facing potential eviction this month. I'm not going to throw a number out there. It's millions of people facing it, because I'm not going to throw a number because depending on where you go, it's going to be different. But either way, we're hurting as a nation. People are economically hurting. Next comes safety needs, security, safety. So a big part of that is being at a job that is secure. A lot of us live paycheck to paycheck, really depend on our employers to the point where it's almost like a slavery relationship, because we're dependent on them for healthcare. So when people get furloughed and they lose their healthcare, it's kind of a big deal. It attacks the safety and security. And so you can't really focus on the rest of these. Belongingness and love needs. So right now, as everything's getting shut down, intimate relationships and friendships are being threatened. People aren't able to spend as much time with each other and get what they need in this area. Esteem needs, prestige and feeling of accomplishment. When you're stuck living in survival mode, scrambling to make things work, you're not going to be able to experience this prestige and feeling of accomplishment. A feeling of accomplishment is looking back in time at what you've accomplished, really building something and succeeding in something. And when you're just scrambling to pay the bills and hustling, you're not going to be able to experience this as much. And the self-actualization, achieving one's full potential through creative activities. You can take creative activities and throw them out the window. I think a big reason why we see, this rise of binge watching, which I think we're all guilty of, is because just there is really high levels of stress. And a big part of that is the financial insecurity that many of us are experiencing. We can't focus on doing things that are creative because we're focused on, if I'm furloughed, is my job going to be there? Or how do I get a new job because my job doesn't pay enough and I can barely live? Or, a whole litany of narratives that are going through all of our heads right now. So this is important because, a large portion of Americans can't even afford an unexpected $400 bill. We don't have savings. And a big reason why that is we're disincentivized to save because of inflation. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. So this is really, really important and is just like a good visualization for why we're experiencing what we're experiencing right now. So getting into Bitcoin, because that's what this channel is about, this is one of my favorite books, The Bitcoin Standard, and it's It's written by this guy named Saifuddin Ammous, and he's a really, really interesting guy, and I really like him. But this book was the first place that I ever heard the idea that issues with mental health could be tied to money. And it's looking at time preference. So time preference is, are we focused on the here and now? When we get a raise, are we going to go out and buy, a nicer car or, a big flat screen TV or something like that? Or are we going to use that money to, put it into savings and invest it and watch it grow over time? And so the majority of Americans are not thinking that way. And we struggle to think that way because we're kind of thrown into this survival mode. The typical narrative is, go to school, get in tremendous amounts of debt. Oftentimes students don't know what they're, really wanting to do with their lives, so they go to school for something that, sounds interesting but doesn't have a ton of application after they graduate, and then they're left reeling with, potentially 6 figures of debt. And so, when you look at the way things are set up right now, it's a setup for failure. It's a setup for increased mental health issues. And a big part of that is the way the money works is it's inflationary, meaning that it loses value, which encourages borrowing and spending. But the problem with that is it's done in a way that essentially leaves us all over leverage. We have way more in debt than we can pay off, and that's why an event like this is so big of a crisis. So yeah, check out this book. It talks a lot more than just Bitcoin. The majority of the book is talking about the way the financial system is set up and the history of money, and it's a very, very good and interesting read. And then it gets into Bitcoin. So if you have no idea what Bitcoin's about, check it out. Now, this is one of my favorite tools. It is a company called Blob Phi. So you deposit cryptocurrency with them and earn interest on it, and it's compounding monthly, which is really cool because compounding interest is what really builds wealth. It is the way to battle inflation. That's why rich people put their assets in things that compound, like stocks. When the stock pays a dividend, they invest it back. So 8.6% interest. So if you don't like Bitcoin, you can convert your cash dollars to something called a stable coin, which is essentially a tokenized version of that dollar, which is a really cool concept. You can deposit it with them and earn that 8.6% interest. Now, Ethereum and Bitcoin, you earn a little bit less. Bitcoin is 6% interest, which is awesome because you're earning interest on it as the asset appreciates. And Ethereum, kind of a similar deal. I'm not as much of a believer in Ethereum, but a lot of people are. So yeah, it's cool that they offer that. There's a few other current cryptocurrencies that are offered. But essentially what this does is it allows you to put your money to work. So the problem is with a traditional savings mechanism, like just putting dollars in the bank account, is that you earn garbage interest, almost nothing. And it does not even compete with the 2% inflation. And inflation is something that's really hard to calculate because it doesn't take into account things like education and healthcare, which are completely unaffordable. Almost none of us can afford to pay for it out of pocket. So What Bitcoin Did podcast is one of my favorite podcasts out there. Peter McCormick is a recovering drug addict, and he does an amazing job of talking about the world, Bitcoin. He's much more than just some nerd that talks about Bitcoin. He's just a normal guy that gets out there, and he's overall a really good journalist. And I think this is a way, looking at the content that we take in is a big part of managing our mental health as well, because if there's not a solution tied to it, things can feel really hopeless, and you can become really depressed and really anxious really easily. And that's the last thing that we need right now, is to feel hopeless and depressed. And so what he does is he brings on some of the smartest people out there to have different discussions, mostly around Bitcoin, but also around events happening in the world. He had Brett Weinstein on, who had a really interesting idea to reshape the political atmosphere. He had Caitlin Long and Raoul Paul on to discuss, what's happening in the markets, and it is just a fantastic podcast. The Pomp podcast is also one of my favorites. Same deal, much more financial oriented than the What Bitcoin Did podcast. But he has this amazing ability to just bring on the smartest people. And it really, I think education is one of the best ways to keep your mind moving and stay productive. If we have an attitude of continuing to grow and continuing to learn, it helps us to feel like we're building something and accomplishing something. And that's why I'm suggesting these podcasts, because they're just amazing resources and they're free. So I love them. Check out the Pomp podcast. He also does this awesome YouTube show with his girlfriend Paulina called Lunch Money, and it's just a really good commentary on news headlines. And yeah. And then the last thing I'll suggest is Brave browser. I really love the Brave browser because it on default blocks ads, and I feel like part of the reason why we have anxiety too is we're just overloaded with useless information. When you scroll through the internet, you just get bombarded with stupid ads. It blocks trackers, so it's not like the internet's reading your mind and selling you products that you were looking at. Keeps your data more private. There's some extensions that I use because the ad block isn't always perfect. Like I use uBlock, and that makes it really easy. So I don't have to watch ads on YouTube videos, and I consume a lot of content on YouTube because there's just a lot of good free information on there. But yeah, I feel like Brave is kind of a cool way to make the internet a little bit less overwhelming, and it gets rid of all the clickbaity stupid stuff on all these sites. And it's amazing when I'm using a computer that doesn't have Brave to see what the internet used to look like. And so I really enjoy Brave. And one of the things that's cool about it too is you can opt into the service to view ads. So it'll throw a little banner up in the top right corner, and you click on it, and it pays you at the end of the month. So you get a little bit of money. So I got $3 in this token, basic attention token, and you can convert that to dollars in your bank account, or you can tip content creators. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing more and more is soft censorship on platforms like YouTube and whatever, where they demonetize videos that are deemed controversial or whatever, or they kick people off the platforms because of the algorithm. So a lot of the people in the cryptocurrency space get attacked, as well as people covering things about China or even sharing controversial things about the U.S. And it's not even crazy people like Alex Jones. It's, really good reporters getting censored. And so that's something that helps me feel like I'm working to create a better world, is supporting those content creators. And Patreon's another really good platform to do that. But yeah, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is we have to focus on the money issue if we're going to get to enjoy really the beauty that life has to offer and get to this point of self-actualization, of really reaching our full potential. One of the worst places to be is just to tune out for our entire life, to miss intimate relationships, to have really good friends, to just sit on the couch watching Netflix all day or scrolling through social media apps, unless it's Twitter, because Twitter's amazing. But Reddit's also pretty great. But yeah, I mean, it really sucks to just be in a position where, you know, you feel like you can't handle things, so you have to tune out. So yeah, those are some tips that I have. I mean, having savings that don't lose their value as you earn really good amounts of interest, probably one of my favorite ways to feel secure. I mean, I've been able to get into a position, though I don't make a ton of money, where I can feel comfortable losing my job, sitting on the couch for months without having to worry about it. And that's an amazing spot to be in. And a lot of people feel like it's too late to get into that point. You know, when you have kids and you have to pay health insurance for them, and you know, all these different things make it so much harder. But when you begin to focus on money, on savings, on being really intentional with your life and lengthening your time preference, you get to enjoy things and see the world differently. And I think this is really a huge part of the solution for a society that isn't being talked about. And I just encourage you to begin to question the ways that and the decisions that you make. What's influencing it? Why do you struggle to have so much savings, or to put money towards savings or hold savings? Why do you struggle with credit card debt? Why do you feel the need to buy the newer, nicer car? You know, why are you really unhappy at work? What is influencing the situations that make your employer not the best? Things like that. And I personally think it all comes back to the way that money works, and that's why I found this book so helpful and enlightening. So yeah, check it out. Thanks for watching.